Good evening. It's a real pleasure to see this group here. Uh, this is a tribute to our speaker, no doubt. But we certainly want to thank First Bank for sponsoring this program, and we just had a wonderful series, and we wind up with the best crowd we've had, the most intelligent-looking crowd. Uh, and Go home and tell your mom and them, and I said that's okay. The opportunity to introduce someone as well known as Dolores uh, is a wonderful opportunity for me to get to tell her personally and with all these witnesses just how pretty I think she is. But I'm going to tell a true story in place of that. Not that that was not true, but this one is better. A few years ago, right after Dolores started coming here, I was standing out in the hall, and this woman came in, and her husband, and had some people with them, and they said, "We're from Etowah County, and we go where Dolores goes." And so they've been following her all over the state, and what have you. And the woman said, she's just delightful. And she turned to the other group and said, "I'd give anything in the world if I was as talented as Dolores, or if I was pretty as Dolores, if I could do the things she does, I would just be the happiest person in the world." And her husband, who was standing with us, said, "I second that." So in the realm of seconding things, we feel the same way, Dolores. We wish we were like you.
Etowah would come and be at my house and do my lawn and help me with, she says she follows me everywhere. I hadn't seen her, in my kitchen cooking meals.
One other thing that she said before the group broke up, said she finally learned the recipe for good cornbread. They've changed their mind. I'm not going to speak at all.
No. Randy Fields, before we get started, I know that they may have to leave early, and I just wanted to tell y'all, Randy Fields is here from First Bank of Alabama, and we love Randy so much for always going to bat for this series for us. And I didn't want them to get away and y'all not to see them and be able to thank them today. So we're going to get right back to the good stuff in just a minute after Randy.
Boy, it gets shorter and shorter, Dolores. I must have failed miserably last time because they keep cutting me off here. All right, guys, thank you for coming. I will say it reminds me like Easter Sunday in church when we have to start adding chairs in the aisles, and you get excited. Everybody's coming in. We are thrilled at First Bank of Alabama to be the sponsor again. You guys know for many, many years, South First Bank was totally committed to this library. And I'm so proud to say Chad Jones, the CEO for First Bank of Alabama, is just as committed as South First. And my little quick infomercial, I will say, South First was the last local bank headquartered here in Sylacauga. First Bank of Alabama is the only bank headquartered in Talladega County. So please, please recognize First Bank of Alabama if you get a chance. Tell those folks over in Talladega or here in Sylacauga, thank you. Two quick introductions. Roger Harris, if you'll just kind of stand up and wave to everybody. Roger is now here with us in Sylacauga. Roger has been with First Bank of Alabama for a number of years. He's a Sylacauga boy, Sylacauga High School grad. We are thrilled to have him. Roger specializes in commercial lending, business banking, all of that. So if you know somebody that's got a small business or a commercial outfit, please give him a call. He can do anything with commercial banking that you need. Sheila Howard, will you stand up? Sheila is our branch manager here in Sylacauga, another Sylacauga native, graduate of B.B. Comer High School. So We are thrilled to have Sheila. She is running the retail side, all of the branch operations, new accounts, loans, anything you need. If you have a question, Sheila can answer it for you. And y'all know me, I'm just running around all over the place. Oh, we have this stranger over here in the corner we forget about all the time, the wonderful and only Chris Kramer. He's just a fixture. I just always know he's here. So Chris is still with us. Chris is doing some wonderful things with public relations, as you know. He also helps out with marketing with Clanton and Sylacauga, so he's participating. We keep him as busy as we can because we love him and we don't want him to go anywhere. So love you, Chris. That's all I got. Sorry, Dr. Ted.
Thank you, Randy, and thank y'all so much. I just want to make sure we recognize this wouldn't be possible without sponsorship. So thank y'all so much. And now we're going to turn it over to you, Miss Dolores.
Thank you, Tracy. Well, thank you. I can't tell you what a treat it is to look out here and see your beautiful faces. Oh my gosh. Do you have any clue what a gift you are for me? Thank you so much. You have made this day more beautiful already. I want to thank First Bank of Alabama for continuing to support this fabulous series. Thanks to Tracy and Sarah and Mike here at the library for keeping this series going. Thanks to Dr. Shirley for keeping me on the lineup. Dr. Ted for his always interesting introductions. You never know what he is going to say. It's a little scary to stand over there and know what he's going to say. But mostly I want to thank all of you for coming out today. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous day. Why are you inside? But I'm glad you are. I'm glad you are. And I understand the sound system is going to be getting replaced. And so because the speakers are right there, I can't be up on the stage. So that's why I'm going to be down here. So I hope you can see okay and hear okay. Is everything good? Well, it's got some stories for you today about finding the beautiful in the everyday. And recently I came across two things that kind of pertain to that. One of them was an article about a group of scientists that have been studying people walking. Now, I've had people say to me, being a storyteller for a living, that's got to be a really easy job. But being a scientist who studies people walking, okay, here's the article. It says a group of scientists have conducted a study of the effect of awe walks, AWE, awe walks, consciously watching for small wonders in the world around you while you take a walk or do any other routine activity. Awe is generally defined as the sense that you are in the presence of something larger and more important than yourself. According to the scientists who organized the study, awe is about focusing on the world outside your own head and remembering that the world is full of marvelous things that are not you. In the study, people who took a fresh look at the objects, moments, and environment around them felt more upbeat and hopeful than people who did not. It's a simple thing to look around for small wonders while you're going about your ordinary day, the lead scientist said, and there is no downside to doing it. That kind of has something to do with the stories today. And then the other thing I was reminded of was a favorite writer, a woman named Bess Streeter Aldrich. She was a writer of the 1930s, 1940s from Nebraska, and she mostly wrote about short stories. She wrote hundreds of short stories, mostly about little towns there in the prairie and the people who live there, people who just tried to live their lives with some grace and dignity and hope and forgiveness. And she was criticized for that because she was called lightweight, because the stories were about nice people trying to do nice things for each other. And of course, the 30s and 40s were a time of much grittier writing. There was the crime noir novels, and there was exposés of political and corporate corruption. There were the dark, cynical stories of Hemingway and Fitzgerald. And so her stories were called Pollyanna stuff. Here's what she had to say about that. An author is a glass through which a picture of life is projected. If one writer does not see life in terms of grime and dirt and debauchery, it does not mean those things do not exist. If another writer does not see life in terms of faith and love, sympathy and good deeds, It does not mean that those things do not exist. I am tired of hearing people say that the sordid is real life and the wholesome is just Pollyanna stuff. I contend that a writer may portray some of the decent things of life and call that real life too. If this be literary treason, make the most of it. So these stories today are a little bit of literary treason. They are some stories about looking for hope and forgiveness and beauty in the everyday. It's not that any of this is going to solve all the problems of the world. It is a dark, dangerous, difficult place out there. But maybe for just 1 hour, we can be reminded that that side of things is not the only side of things. And there's more to the story than that. So some true stories. Sarah, if Sarah's back there, I'm getting a kind of a lot of echo. I don't know if you hear it, but there's kind of a lot of echo. If we can get that turned down just a tiny bit. The green branches streaked into the sky like rockets. Stop, I said. I grabbed Evelyn's arm. She slammed on the brakes. The maroon Dodge Caravan swerved, skidded to a stop. What? She said. Those junipers, I said. Look at those gorgeous junipers. Oh my goodness, she said, you scared me. I thought I ran over something. It was late April, several years ago, and I was in South Alabama visiting my friend Evelyn. We were driving along, following the bright pink stripe painted along the edge of the road, the stripe that marked the path of her town's azalea trail. Late April, South Alabama. Way too late for azalea blooms, but still, that bright pink ribbon led us through gorgeous neighborhoods, past beautiful homes, well-tended gardens. My friend Evelyn is a fellow gardening enthusiast. She has in her yard a prize-winning collection of 27 unique camellias. Me, at the time, I was crazy about conifers. I'm not just talking about plain old blue rug juniper. I had fallen in love with the broad shoulders of the western green giant arborvitae, the wispy silvery foliage of this Carolina sapphire cypress, the dark, mysterious black dragon cryptomeria. I don't know how it happened. You know, when I first started gardening, I would go to the garden center, I would be seduced by the siren song of the hybrid tea roses, with their come hither names like Easy Street, Glad Tidings, Heart of Gold, Just Joey. Then I'd get them home. And after an entire summer of weeding, feeding, fertilizing, spraying, mulching, they fried and died anyway of black spot and drought. And I realized they should have been named Dead End, Tough Luck, Heartbreaker, and Just Kidding. Then I went through my perennial phase, where I could just imagine shrub beds edged in a bright, cheery perennial border, until I learned the true definition of that term, perennial, a plant that, had it lived, would have bloomed year after year. But now I was in love with conifers. I don't know how it happened. Maybe it was growing up in Pennsylvania, where the hemlocks and spruce trees kept some hope of green alive all during those long gray Pennsylvania winters. Oh, maybe it was reading Heidi every summer from the time I was 8 until I was 14. Heidi, with its images of fir trees swaying above the cabin where Heidi lived with grandfather, and where she would go to sleep up in the loft on a bed of sweet-smelling pine straw after a supper of black bread slathered with melted golden cheese, washed down with a cup of goat's milk still warm from one of grandfather's goats. I don't know, maybe that's why I loved conifers, and why whenever I was around them, I had a sudden craving for dairy products. I don't know, whatever it was, I wanted some of these evergreen beauties in my yard, but I didn't know how they would do here. I mean, Pennsylvania, okay, Switzerland, sure, but Alabama in August? I mean, were there fungal diseases I had to worry about? Were there some kind of pests I had to fight? but somebody knew how to grow them. Here were 6, 8, 10, 12 of these gorgeous green rockets streaking into the sky out of every corner of the tan house spread out in front of us. Oh, I just had to know, how would they do? Well, my friend Evelyn, fellow gardener, understood why I needed to know. Oh, she said, that's Mrs. Thomas's house. I was on a committee that she chaired at the museum a few years ago. I'm sure she won't remember me, but she's really nice. I know she wouldn't mind if we stopped to ask. Oh, there she is now. The broad brim of a straw hat disappeared down a garden path under a cloud of Confederate jasmine on a little arbor. We parked the car, walked through a low wrought iron gate, past a row of small, brightly blooming, flowering shrubs. Evelyn called out, Mrs. Thomas. The straw hat turned. Mrs. Thomas looked to be in her late 70s, maybe early 80s. Her eyes were clear, sharp, very blue. She was wearing a sleeveless pink cotton shirt, drawstring cotton pale blue trousers, and white sneakers, not fancy shoes, just plain old white Keds. A single key dangled from a diaper pin pinned to her shirt collar. Evelyn said, we were just following what's left of the azalea trail, Mrs. Thomas. Was your garden on the tour this year? Oh, my, no, dear. I was on the committee. I would never think of promoting my own humble efforts. Mrs. Thomas's humble efforts seemed to encompass half a city block. I said, I see you have some of those brand new, what are they called? I think they're called knockout roses. Everybody seems to have them now. Are they, so you see you've got some there in the front. Are they really as pretty and carefree as everybody says? I don't know, dear. They just went in the ground a few weeks ago, but I doubt it. I suspect they either won't be that pretty or they won't be that carefree. I used to teach Western civilization, and that's what history teaches us, isn't it? That anything really beautiful or worthwhile or of some lasting value requires time, effort, attention to detail. Ask the Greeks, ask Michelangelo, ask William Shakespeare, or you can come back at the end of the summer and ask me about the roses. A man emerged from behind a shrub bed. He was, I don't know, mid-40s, sort of Saturday morning stubble of a beard. He was wearing Bermuda shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, not one of those brightly colored, button down the front, loose-fitting kind of Hawaiian shirts, but a T-shirt with a map of the Hawaiian Islands on it. In his arms, he carried a small, fluffy black dog. Mrs. Thomas turned to Evelyn and me, said, why don't you join us, dears? I was just giving the garden tour to Mr. She paused. He filled in the blank. Abernant, Jack Abernant. And this, indicating the dog, this is Ripley. He's a very fierce guard dog, believe it or not. Aren't you, Ripley? Ripley barked by way of introduction. Mr. Abernant said, I was just admiring Mrs. Thomas's lilacs. That's the thing I miss the most since I moved here from Long Island, the smell of lilacs in the spring. Nothing like it. Everybody told me it's way too hot to grow lilacs down here, but Mrs. Thomas seems to be able to do it. Well, I don't know what all the fuss is, dear. I grew that lilac shrub from a cutting I took from a shrub up near my summer home in Mentone. The lilacs do fine up there. I just assumed they would do well here, too. And they have. I had the feeling Mrs. Thomas often expected a lot of the things and people around her. We followed, the three of us followed Mrs. Thomas down a path around a corner. This is the Japanese garden. We were in a little corner of the garden that was shaded by leafy branches of Japanese maples. At the end of the path was a squared off wooden archway painted bright orange, and from the center of the archway hung a heavy bronze bell. That is a torii gate. It's found in most Shinto shrines. My late husband, William, made that for me. He never made anything out of wood before or afterwards, but didn't he do a splendid job? And that is a temple bell. It's a symbol of long life and prosperity. That is described with the character for harmony. And aren't these beautiful? She pointed to a pair of clay pots stuck in the dirt, partially obscured by ferns growing up around them. Out of each pot grew a wrought iron vine covered in wrought iron flowers and leaves. I saw something just like that in Montecatini, a garden in northern Italy, and I thought it was so beautiful. I sketched it out, and when I came home, this clever young man, a blacksmith from Mobile, made that for me. Aren't they beautiful? Around another corner, the lawn narrowed to a grassy lane edged by a tall evergreen hedge that was neatly trimmed. At the end of that path was a fountain bubbling into a little pond that was being permanently visited by a pair of bronze cranes. One crane had its beak dipped down in the water. The other was standing with its head tilted back as though savoring that last trickle of liquid down its throat. This is the Italian garden, such as it is. Of course, it's meant to be seen from that window. She pointed back to the house where a whole wall of little rectangular window panes glinted in the sunshine. At the top of the wall of windows was an arched window. That's a Palladian window, she said, named for Andrea Palladio, 16th century Italian architect. In Italy, a Palladian window looks out on a garden composition, far grander than this one, of course, but you get the idea. I used to teach Western civilization, and I always loved the section on Italian Renaissance art and architecture. Mrs. Thomas's garden was gorgeous, but inviting too, with little discoveries here and there, arbors covered with a Lady Banksia rose. Here was a grove of fruit trees. Oh, I love my fruit trees, must have my fruit trees. There's a peach tree, pear, oh, a fig. I love fresh figs, don't you, dear? There was a curved concrete bench underneath the limbed up branches of the fig tree. You could just picture Mrs. Thomas sitting there on a late summer afternoon, her straw hat shading a book on Botticelli in her lap, as she reached up to pluck a fig and bite down into the purple flesh. Evelyn said, "You seem to really enjoy your garden, Mrs. Thomas." "Oh, I do, dear. And it's a good thing, too, because it takes nearly all the time I have. I look after all of this, you know. Well, there is a young man who comes and takes care of the lawn, but he just mows, blows, and goes. The rest is up to me." We had arrived at a table and 4 chairs made of curly-cued white wrought iron. She invited us to sit. Then she gestured back toward the house and said, "This is my dream house. I didn't build it. Someone else built it for me. He thought he was building it for himself, but he wasn't. He was building it for me." She turned to Evelyn. Did you know Mr. Handley, dear? Mr. Michael Handley?" Evelyn shook her head. "Well, the Handleys were good friends of ours, and one summer the Handleys went over to Italy, and Mr. Handley saw a house just like this one there on the outskirts of the city of famous Italian city. The 3 of us tried to help her. Rome, Milan, Florence. No. I used to teach Western civilization. I should remember the name of this famous Italian city. Mr. Abernant said, "It's too bad my T-shirt has a map of the Hawaiian Islands on it. If it was a map of Europe, maybe that would help us remember." Mrs. Thomas looked at him as though she thought the T-shirt was one of the more unfortunate developments of Western civilization. Hardly a suitable canvas for a map of its capitals. But maybe just the idea was so ridiculous it jogged her memory, because she suddenly said, "Venice!" Ripley barked. "Venice," she repeated. Mr. Handley saw a house just like this one on the outskirts of the city of Venice. Well, he fell in love with the house. He had plans drawn up just like it. When he came home, he purchased this piece of property and began to build it. Well, as soon as I saw it coming up out of the ground, I knew what it was. I used to teach Western civilization. And nearly every summer, William and I would go to visit Italy or France or Greece. So I recognized it immediately. And I said to Mr. Handley, "If you ever change your mind about this house, I want to buy it from you." "Oh, no," he said, "this is our dream house." And Louise and I plan to stay here the rest of our days. Well, the house came up out of the ground. I would drive past, I would come out of my way to go past it. And finally, the house was finished on the outside, not the landscaping, but the outside. They were putting details on the interior. When poor Mr. Handley had a massive heart attack and died at the age of 68. And not 5 months later, Louise died of a brain aneurysm. They never lived one day in this house. Well, the house sat empty for nearly a year. They had one daughter. She lived in Maine or Michigan or Maryland, one of the M states. But then one day I saw the sign in the front yard. I called William at his office. I said, William, my house is for sale. He said, I'll take care of it. And he drove straight to the real estate office and bought the house on the spot. He knew that's what I wanted him to do. She looked right at me and said, he was just that kind of man, and looked away. Then she continued, the first time William or I ever set foot in this house, we already owned it. And inside it was everything I knew it would be. It was my dream house, and poor Mr. Handley had built it for me. Would you like to see inside? She stood up. Ripley barked. Mr. Abernan said, oh, we better be going. Ripley's getting a little restless, but thanks for the tour and for sharing your lilacs. Anytime, dear. Stop by and sniff away anytime. Evelyn and I followed her around the outside of the house, up the front steps. That single key on the diaper pin let us in the front door. It was dim inside after the bright light of the garden, but once our eyes adjusted, we could see that we were in a hallway, a huge hallway, almost as big as a room, and the walls were covered with artwork, watercolors, oils, acrylics, huge, small, oval, square, wooden frames, silver frames, gold frames. The hallway opened into the living room, a bright, sunny room. Directly opposite us was the wall of window panes topped by the Palladian window. Evelyn and I headed right for that window when Mrs. Thomas's voice stopped us. Mind the rug, dears. I don't walk on this rug. Our sneakered feet hovered above a white rug, a white needlepoint rug made of 12 squares, each square about 18 inches on a side. Each square was needle-pointed with a creamy white background, a design in the center of bright yellow flowers, bright green leaves caught up in a darker green bow, the same design repeated in every corner of every square. We retreated from the airspace. As we walked around, Mrs. Thomas said to us, yes, I made that rug. It took me 12 years, 1 year for each square. We reconnected on the other side of the rug in front of the window. Mrs. Thomas was there. Me and Evelyn looked out. The bronze cranes were still there, enjoying their mid-morning drink. Mrs. Thomas said, I love this window. I love to stand here first thing in the morning, finishing my coffee, planning my day, watching the birds. I couldn't help glancing over at Mrs. Thomas's hands. Her late 70s, early 80s hands looked so strong and steady. I couldn't help thinking how confident she had to be of their strength and steadiness to trust them to carry a cup of black coffee across a white rug at 6 o'clock in the morning. The living room was gorgeous. There were antiques everywhere, but it looked like it was lived in too. There were indentations on the sofa cushion, like somebody actually sat there. There were books strewn around the room, not decoratively, but upside down, splayed open, as if someone had been reading them. There were pieces of needlework everywhere, cushions, pillows, pieces framed and hung on the wall. Evelyn said, did you do all of that needlework as well? Oh, my, yes, dear. William and I raised 2 sons. And when they were teenagers and would go out of an evening, I never was able to sleep until they were safely back at home. The needlework kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. They were lively boys. The dining room was dominated by a huge carved wooden table surrounded by 10 upholstered chairs. Mrs. Thomas turned to us. I love this table. It's from Bruges, Belgium. Found it in a shop over there. Had it sent home. It's so beautiful. I only wish I had a room to do it justice. It has extensions. It's meant to seat 18. I suppose it's just as well, though. I only have 12 place settings of my china. She gestured toward a china cabinet, 19th century French, she said. It housed a display of delicate china that had a gold edge and a delicate floral pattern in the center of each plate. That's Meissen china, she said. Then, directly to me, correctly guessing I would need to have that explained. That's the finest of all the European porcelains, far better even than Dresden china. I don't say that to brag, dear, only because it's true. Of course, even 12 place settings are 11 too many. I don't seem to have much company anymore these days. In the kitchen, the breakfast nook table was set with one place setting of the delicate Meissen china. I use it every day. That's what it's for. It's not meant to be kept shut up in a box. When I'm gone, of course, it will all go to the museum, but I like to enjoy it while I can. She steered us on a guided tour of the rest of the house. Again, needlework everywhere, handmade quilts. The four-poster bed in the main bedroom was covered by a white coverlet embroidered in an elaborate floral pattern. We didn't even ask her if she'd made that. She told us that she made that. In fact, I made that twice. The first one I made, after a while, had it sent off to be dry cleaned. And though I gave them specific instructions on how it was to be handled, when I got it back, I discovered that not only had they washed it in bleach. Well, of course, the threads were all frayed and faded and broken. There was nothing to do but get another set of materials and make it again. She led us back to the front hallway, stopped in front of a small oil painting, 16th century Italian, she said with some pride. And then she turned to Evelyn and said, did you know Dr. Meady, dear? Evelyn thought a moment. Dr. Meady, did he have something to do with the Methodist hospital? He founded the Methodist hospital, dear. Well, Dr. Meady had the most marvelous collection of 16th and 17th century French and Italian paintings. Oh, he was a wonderful man, and William and I were good friends of Dr. Meady and his wife, his first wife. Wonderful woman. It was a tragedy that she passed away so young. And then he married that other woman who had no idea what she had. It wasn't clear if Mrs. Thomas was talking about Dr. Meady himself or the art collection. When he died, she was only too eager to get rid of what she called all that old stuff. She sold off the collection at a fraction of its value. I got this painting for next to nothing. Of course, it will go to the museum when I'm gone, too. I find one doesn't ever really own art. One is just privileged to be allowed to take care of it for a little while. Then she turned to me. Can you read this painting, dear? Can you see what it tells us about these people and the world they lived in? I was in Mrs. Thomas's Western Civilization class, and like hundreds of her students before me, I was not prepared for today's pop quiz. I looked at the painting. It was kind of small, just about that big, dark oil. There was a woman standing on a kind of balcony. Behind her was an archway, and through the archway, you could see this young man who had a kind of a stringed instrument in his hand. He was looking at her. I said, they seem to like music and each other. Yes, dear, but what does this painting tell us about the world they lived in? She gave me a hint. What is that on the balcony railing, dear? Looks like an oriental rug. Yes, that tells us that they lived in a global economy. Now we think of people back then as being so isolated and cut off, but I find people who lived back then were far more curious about the rest of the world than many of the people I know living in this city right now. What else does this painting tell you about this young woman and her family, dear? Again, a hint. What is that in her hand, dear? It's a little book. Yes, that tells us that this young woman could read. 16th century Italy, and a young woman was literate. Can you imagine how progressive and forward-thinking her father must have been? I used to teach Western civilization. And I would take my students to the museum and show them paintings like this, and they would walk right past, rolling their eyes and grumbling how it had nothing to do with them. But art can teach us so much about other lives, other worlds, the choices other people made before us to shape the world we live in now, but only if we stop and look for it. She paused, as if uncertain whether to continue on. And then she said, the world is full of things that are ugly, stupid, vulgar, crude, evil. And we notice those things. You can't help but notice those things. They're everywhere. But the world is also full of things that are lovely and graceful and a reminder of the beauty the human spirit is capable of. But unless we stop and notice those things, we'll think they don't exist. And they do. She shook her head, offered us a glass of tea. We declined, said we'd taken enough of her time. I said, thank you for the tour, Mrs. Thomas, and for the trip to Italy. Anytime, dear. Stop by anytime. Evelyn and I headed for the front door, Mrs. Thomas apologizing for the fact that she had not yet had time that morning to sweep the front porch steps where a single oak leaf rested at the top step. Evelyn and I headed down the steps toward our car when Mrs. Thomas suddenly called out to us, there is one thing you could do for me. What could we possibly do for Mrs. Thomas? She said, the next time you drive by, slow down and really notice the garden. We promised that we would. Got back in the van, headed back home. We didn't say much, Evelyn and I, on the drive back. I don't know about Evelyn, but I couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Thomas, this woman who surrounded herself with beautiful things, not in an ostentatious way. Oh, I would never think of promoting my own humble efforts. Not because of any attention it got her. I don't seem to have much company anymore. Not because of the wealth it represented. This will all go to the museum when I'm gone. But just because they were beautiful things, meant to be noticed and appreciated by somebody. I couldn't help thinking, Mrs. Thomas didn't just used to teach Western civilization. She was Western civilization. She was the good part of Western civilization. A woman who invested time, effort, attention to detail to make her little piece of the world a little more civilized place. Because that's what it takes, isn't it? Time, effort, attention to detail. You can ask the Greeks, ask Michelangelo, ask William Shakespeare, or, well, until just a few years ago, you could have gone down to South Alabama to ask Mrs. Thomas. She would have told you, no. She would have shown you. True story, Mrs. Thomas. That story, that happened as driving back from there. It's a 3.5-hour drive back. I have a little notebook in my car, and I'm driving on Highway 231, trying to write what she said and what she did and what she wore, so I would remember every detail. That happened just like that. Another true story, and some of you who are familiar with some of my stories will know this story, but I am reminded of this all the time. And some people say, they say people teach what they need to learn. Well, I think storytellers tell the stories that they need to hear. And I need to hear this story over and over again. So that's why I'm telling it to you today. It's a true story. It's a story that happened on a Saturday in early March a few years ago. It was one of those Saturdays in early March, like we are going to have this Saturday. One of those days like we are having today. And we'll have tomorrow, and we're going to have Friday, and we're going to have Saturday, and probably Sunday too. One of those days we get here in Alabama in early March, where the sun comes out, and the air is warm and glorious, and it's been winter, and you cannot bear to be indoors one more minute. I had work I had to do. I had emails to answer and files to organize, but my laptop was going to let me take all of that outside. And so I gathered up my computer and glasses and pens and papers and headed out to work at the little black wrought iron table there on my back porch. First, I had to put everything down and just walk through the yard. Just feel that sun on my face and neck and shoulders. Oh my goodness, everything's so beautiful. The plum trees, the pear trees, profusely in bloom, big, fat, pink magnolia, those tulip magnolia blossoms. Oh my goodness, everywhere. Look at that blue ice cypress. It must have grown 8 more inches over the wintertime. I remember how tiny it was when it went in the ground years ago. A housewarming gift from my friend Linda, who knew when I moved into that house, I needed trees more than I needed a toaster. In fact, as I look around the yard, I realize how many things there are gifts from people. Oh, there's the coral azalea from my friend Marie. There's the purple angel face rose that my friend Carl gave me. There's all those Japanese maples that my friend David grafted and grew and gave to me, planted for me, dug huge holes, brought in sacks of topsoil and mulch. There's the curved concrete bench my mother gave me. I can picture her sitting on that bench when she would come to visit me. She'd sit there smiling up at that bird that she swore sang a song, sounded just like it was calling my dad's name. Peter, 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 Peter. I hear hammering next door. It's my neighbor, Jason. He's building a fence around his yard, a fence made of those long wooden planks rounded on top. They look like giant popsicle sticks. When he started the fence a few weeks earlier, I asked him, I said, so you walling things in or walling things out? Oh, he said, just trying to keep the kids and dogs from running off. He has one more side to finish, the side that divides his yard from mine. Adam is helping him. Adam lives further down the street. Adam and Jason, they do a lot of things together. They got a lot in common. They're both in their 30s. They're both dads. Adam has 2 kids. Jason has 3. In fact, they're not just both dads. They're both dads of newborns. Allison is 3 months old. Little baby Wren showed up 2 weeks ago. I head over their way. I say, hey, how are you guys doing? Are those little ones letting you get any sleep? Oh, not so much, Jason says. I've been up since 2 this morning. 2, Adam says, you lucky dog. Wren started crying at 4 a.m. I never was able to go back to sleep. I say, so between the 2 of you, you don't have 9 solid hours of sleep and you're out here with chainsaws and power tools? Jason holds up a bright green soft drink can. We're fueled by Mountain Dew and sunshine. Lauren, Jason's wife, comes out the back door of their house, cradling 3-month-old baby Allison in her arms. Their 2 little boys, aged 4 and 6, carve swirly figure 8s in and around her legs before they run off to the back of the yard to visit the chicken coop, which is home to 2 chickens that they've named Monkey and Juice. Tiny white cloth diapers flutter on a clothesline that stands next to a rainwater collection tank that feeds into a raised vegetable bed. You can still see the green tops of carrots and kale from the winter vegetable garden. Lauren makes her own yogurt. April, Adam's wife, mother of their 2 children. April does not make her own yogurt. April kind of relies on Huggies and Happy Meals and hopes for the best. April is trudging up the hill on the other side of my house, trying to keep up with their 2-year-old daughter named Lark. That's her name, Lark. Lark is running up the hill, scaring the cat, bending down to sniff a tulip that has no smell. Then she plops down right in the middle of the street so she can examine an excellent rock she found there. April has 2-week-old baby Wren with her. Wren, that's his name. She has the baby in this little snuggly so she can hold him close. I haven't seen the newborn yet. She brings him over for me to admire. I look at that face so red and fierce, those eyes squinted shut. He looks like a miniature Mr. Magoo. And as I look at that tiny, determined face, I think, this child will probably see the 22nd century. He'll be in his 80s when the calendar flips to the year 2100. He'll probably make it. And it's so strange to think that I'm looking at the face of someone who will see a world I will never see. April takes off running, trying to intercept Lark, who has just turned down the alleyway chasing a bee. I go over, sit down at the table, flip open the laptop. The cat jumps in my lap, insists on having his head scratched, demands the undivided attention he so richly deserves. Then he hops over to the other chair, circles the green and white striped cushion twice, then flops down, dozes off, a fuzzy white igloo that rises and falls as he drifts off to sleep. I hear children's voices laughing and calling out on the street in front of the house, their high voices harmonizing with the notes of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer. Da-da-da-da, da-da, da-da, played over and over and over by the ice cream truck that roams through the neighborhood. I hear Adam and Jason next door. Hey, this next one needs to be exactly 5 feet, 10 inches. That other one fit. Oh, not so much. Darn, it reminds me of that dumb joke. The guy says, oh, this stupid board, I keep cutting it and cutting it. It's still too short. They laugh. The Mountain Dew is kicking in. Ordinarily, Lance would be helping them with the fence project. Lance is the 30-something single guy who lives on the other side of me. Lance, Adam, Jason, they do a lot together, but today Lance is busy. Lance is getting ready for a cookout he's having for some friends there in his backyard later that evening. And so Lance is marinating. Lance is a wonderful cook. His vanity license plate says chutney. And so Lance is cleaning the house and setting up folding tables and chairs in his backyard. And while he works, he is listening to The Doors' greatest hits. A 30-something guy listening to a rock band from the 60s. Come on, baby, light my fire. He has got it cranked up really loud so he can hear it outside, and I can hear it too. It comes pouring out through the screen door, through the sunshine, across the street, over to my back porch. And that husky Jim Morrison voice and familiar keyboard riff, take me back. Back across time, back across geography, back to another Saturday morning. A gray, drizzly September Saturday morning. I'm in my childhood home back in Reading, Pennsylvania. I'm there in my bedroom. I am 19 years old, and I love the Doors. I am ready to light somebody's fire. I'm ready to have my fire lit too. Come on, baby, light my fire. The song swirls out of the stereo as I sing along and stuff the last few items into the little black suitcase that will accompany me for the next 12 months. It is the September after the summer, after my sophomore year of college, and my college roommate, Julie McSweeney, and I were heading off to Europe for a year. We had been students at George Washington University in downtown Washington, D.C., our freshman dorm building 4 blocks from the White House. And sophomore year, freshman year, had been so crazy. March on Washington, student protests against Vietnam, Cambodia, tear gas in the streets, student strikes. It had been so confusing, not just politically, but academically too. In just 4 semesters, Julie and I, between the two of us, had burned through 6 different majors. I started out in political science, moved on to pre-med, ended up in theater and drama. Julie went from mathematics to sociology to modern dance. We both had to admit we didn't have a clue what we were doing. So we decided we'd stop, we'd take a break. We'd travel, see the world, find ourselves, figure it out along the way. Armed with 2 semesters of French, 2 semesters of German, and 2 19-year-olds' sense of invincibility. We were heading off to Europe for a year, following a man. A man who made promises we both believed. A man named Arthur. Arthur Frommer, who told us we could do it on $5 a day. I do not remember the conversation where I told my mother about my plan. I do not remember telling her that I was quitting school. Julie and I were going to fly to Frankfurt, Germany, try to buy a used VW Beetle, drive around Europe for a year. I don't remember telling her that, but I must have. I do remember I never had that conversation with my dad. My mother cleared the whole thing with him. He and I never once spoke about it, never talked about where I was going, what I was doing, until that gray, drizzly September Saturday. Come on, baby, light my fire. The doors revolved through the final chorus of that song as I switched off the stereo, shut the lid, picked up the suitcase, took it downstairs. My dad slung the suitcase into the trunk of the gray Chevy Caprice Classic, and off we went, the 3 of us, my mom, my dad, and me, heading down I-95 to Dulles International Airport, where I would meet up with Julie, and off we would go. We were all 3 pretty quiet on that 3-hour drive. Even my mother. My mother always talked on car trips. She would read out the billboards if she couldn't think of something else to say, but even she was quiet. We got about 20 miles outside the airport, and my dad caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He said, "Schluggo, you're going over there, and you think you're going to find a better way to live. But I think what you're going to find is that everything you really want is in your own backyard." That's all he said. He looked away, asked my mom to check the exit number. 15 minutes later, we were there at the terminal. There was Julie. The adventure began. What was he talking about? There were worlds to see, people to meet, adventures to be had, life to be lived. I didn't know what he meant that day. I didn't know what he meant that year. I didn't know what he meant for years to come as my little life twisted, unfolded, followed its little path. I don't think I really understood what he meant until that warm, sunny March Saturday, sitting there on my back porch, the sun shining, the birds chirping, the flowers blooming, the neighbors hammering, the kids laughing, the grill smoking, the computer humming, the cat purring. I have a sweet house, a safe place to live. I have work I love to do, and people like you who let me do it. I'm surrounded by gifts that remind me there are people in this world who somehow love me. I have good neighbors who protect their families and feed their friends and believe enough in this tired old world to bring determined little babies into it. I have a cat who helps me keep things in perspective, reminds me daily I am not the center of the universe. Home, work, family, friends, hope that the world will be okay. that there are people coming along behind us who will somehow try to figure it out. I finally get it. My dad was right. Everything I really want is in my own backyard. Thank you for letting me be in your backyard so many times. It's so great to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Dolores. She's always so good. And I hope that today, like she said, it's gorgeous outside. I hope that this sends you off with a better peace of mind, with some happy things to focus on today. I want to say one more time, thank you so much for being here and being a part of our series. It means so much for you to come out each week. I also want to thank again the bank, Randy, Sheila, Mr. Chris. Thank y'all so much, First Bank of Alabama, for sponsoring. I also want to mention the Hickory Street Cafe for always being so good to help sponsor our refreshments. I will make sure Vanessa knows. She always checks to make sure everything went well. We will let her know as well. And thank you to Dr. Shirley Spears in the back of the room with the Comer Library Foundation. Dr. Spears works really hard. She's already lining up programs for October series. We already have 2 programs. One is Miss Dolores lined up for October. So we hope you'll be on the lookout. If you are not on the mailing list, please make sure to stop by the table at the back and put your name and your address down. Sometimes we have a little trouble getting things publicized for whatever reason, but we want to make sure that you get a flyer in the mail if you would like to have one. Again, thank you also to Miss Jane in the back and Mr. Chris for coming and always helping work the table and take care of everybody. We look forward to seeing you again in the fall. Thank you all so much and have a beautiful day. Oh, wait, Miss Dolores has got...
I forgot to mention, I also have a mailing list where I can let you know there's actually, things are opening up. There's things going to be, they're on the calendar again. So if you are not already on my mailing list, let me know how to reach you so I can tell you about
And you
those.
have some things for sale.
I have some CDs here as well.
Miss Dolores
yes,
has some CDs, so stop by and pick one up. Something great to listen to. Thank you.